It, one of the more confusing titled stories, which kind of makes sense when you realise that it was going to be, Stephen King's last novel, or so he thought at the time, and you can tell that he just took all of his different ideas that he had left over and just kind of rammed them hodgepodge into the one story. And ultimately I think it kind of works. I've never found the miniseries or the novel or this new film scary, and that's never really bothered me, because what I like about it is the mythology of it, you know, the cosmology that Stephen King's come up with and how it's expressed through this film, book, miniseries. I always kind of view it more like a dark urban fantasy that happens to, you know, borrow horror trappings than a horror film. In the same way that, you know, Star Wars is a fantasy film that just happens to borrow, you know, sci-fi trappings rather than a science fiction movie. If you like the telemovie or the novel, I think you'll like this new film. As I said, I'm a fan of both, and I think that this one holds up really well. It actually might be my favourite version of the three. You know, the novel is obviously difficult to get through because it's like 1,000 and something pages long, and there's a lot of... it kind of feels almost like it was paid by the word. You know, there's a lot of just word going onto the page, which is not a complaint. I mean, that's why I liked it, but it's not easy to just pick it up and reread it, is what I mean. And the miniseries, I think most people agree the kids are really great. The adults, worse actors. Like, their whole part is just so much worse. The kids are way better actors in the miniseries. And so this new film, it's one of two. The new movie it's just the kids. It's just the stuff in... well, what was the 50s in the miniseries, they've updated the setting to the 80s, to the late 80s, for their childhoods in this version. And I think it works really well. Obviously, you know, I love it. I get a lot of nostalgia for that sort of period of time, and that really appeals to me. And it's really interesting seeing the kid from Stranger Things, whose name I can't remember and I will put here, because he is a very talented actor, I think. And it's really interesting seeing him in another thing set in the 80s. And he's really good at it. Let me segue into my next bit from that, actually. I feel like in the miniseries the focus was kind of more on Pennywise, you know, on the eponymous It. And of all the iterations, that one focused most on Tim Curry and Tim Curry's performance, which I think was interesting because it kind of stuck out like a sore thumb. You know, his performance didn't quite kind of gel with the rest of the miniseries, I feel. But it was very memorable, and I loved Tim Curry, obviously. Like I said, never really found him scary. I kind of agree with the nostalgia critic. I look at that miniseries, I'm like, people found this scary? Are you sure you don't mean funny? He's very entertaining, but he doesn't quite gel with the rest of the tone of the film. In the new film, I feel like the focus is much more off Pennywise and onto the kids, and it works. Bill Skarsgård, there's nothing wrong with his performance, and it gels a lot better with the rest of the film and with the tone, but it's just not as sort of memorable as Tim Curry's. And I don't really know, you know, is it better to have something that doesn't really fit but is really memorable, or something that works really well in the setting but is kind of forgettable? Ultimately, like I said, I think I like this one the best, even without Tim Curry, because of the focus on the kids. And all the child actors in this one, just like the miniseries, are great. And I even like Stranger Things kid better in the role of Richie than I did the young Seth Green. You know, Seth Green, I love him in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but in that, he was kind of annoying. He was kind of annoying, but that was sort of part of the character. In the new film, I feel like the actor manages to make the character not annoying, but just entertaining. You know, you can tell he's annoying to the other people in the film, but to us, the audience, you know, he's funny. You know, he comes out with all these he swears a lot, more than you could get away with in the miniseries. He comes out with a lot of really crude sex jokes, and that's kind of what being on that sort of cusp of adolescence, the cusp of adolescence really is about, in some ways, and I feel like this film really captured that. That's the other thing I really like about the story of It, both the miniseries and the novel, is it captures that really awkward phase where you're still in childhood, but you're starting to come into adolescence, and you're just kind of in that grey area. And I feel like this film does a really good job at capturing that. That's one of the really enjoyable parts for me. Overall, the plot is kind of streamlined from both the miniseries and the novel. I mentioned earlier when I was watching it, I was thinking, wow, they've been really faithful to keeping all the details kind of exactly the same. But when I went back and rewatched the miniseries, well, I tell a lie, I rewatched the Nostalgia Critic review because I didn't have a spare 5 hours. And I didn't reread the novel because I didn't have a spare 20 hours. I just read the Wikipedia page, and it all kind of came flooding back, and I was sort of like, wow, this has actually changed a lot from what I remember. But all the changes felt right. They felt natural, and they worked, which is why I kind of didn't notice. They did things like combining different characters' traits, swapping some things around between the kids. They removed a lot of the fluff, and they kind of focused on the more important things. One of the things I liked, for example, was the new kid, the fat kid, who writes the postcard to Beverly, and they took the new kid stuff that was originally on Mike. I can't remember the fat kid's name. I don't feel bad calling him a fat kid because I was a fat kid. Make of that what you will. But they took the whole sort of new kid, thing from Mike, who was the black kid. He's the butcher's son. They took the new kid thing from him and put it into the fat kid, and it works better there. And so they've got him with no friends, who hasn't met any people yet. So he spends all his time in the library, and that's how he finds out about all of the 27-year cycle, is from researching in the library. And that's all kind of done away with in one scene, and that's all you need, and it works, because then the focus is on the kid's reactions and the sort of fallout of that discovery. In the novel, for example, how they find that out, the scene is they build a sweat lodge, like a Native American sweat lodge type of thing, but sort of, and they have some weird hallucination showing how Pennywise/it arrived as a meteor, and it's weird. And I like it in the context of the novel, but it wouldn't work on screen. What they've done works perfectly on screen. And that actually kind of summarises the whole thing, is I think all the things I liked about the book and I liked about the miniseries are done exactly as well here, and I like them just as much. And the things I didn't like about the miniseries or the novel are done... Oh yes, hello Pico. Are done a lot better in this film, I think. The one exception would be... spoilers. When, at the end, they go down to the sewers to confront Pennywise, and all the kids are floating in the air, and they're going, oh, because they float down here. And I thought that was, I was like, I like it better when that's just a vaguely sinister threat of, corpses floating in the water. I thought that was a lot more effective than oh, they're all hovering around in the air. I thought that was a bit silly. But other than that, I think everything was kind of an improvement. And that's coming from someone who, like I said, I like the originals. They ignored that weird, spoilers for the novel, prepubescent sex orgy from the book, which, like, I've read Stephen King explaining it, and, like, I can see why he wrote it, but still, like, dude, editor should have taken that out. So, like, obviously that wasn't in the miniseries, and obviously it's not here. They just do the, cutting their palms and, doing the blood oath thing, and that's a really good scene, it works. And in fact, the whole ending is, you don't need a part 2 from this one. I mean, they're going to do it, they throw, end of chapter 1 up at the end of the film, but it doesn't need it, because they defeat Pennywise and they say, right, we'll return in 27 years in case, he isn't really dead and comes back. And they, agree, and they all have, like, all their character arcs, all their individual stories get a satisfying resolution, and they all, leave, and that's the end of the film. And you could just stop watching there, and it works fine. So I'm gonna go and see the second part because I'm really curious about it, but I don't feel like I would have to in order to get the story. This is a complete story, everything's told. If they never made the sequel, if they hadn't put that end of chapter 1 at the end credits, no one would ever know. And I think that's a really good decision. The one thing I don't like that they've done here necessarily, I'm not sure how I feel about it actually, is they've taken all the sort of weird, sort of incestuous, rapey subtext with Bev's father, and they've just made it plain text. And on the one hand, it's interesting to contrast that with one of the main themes, I guess, of the novel and of the miniseries and of this film is all about, childhood fears versus adult fears. You've got your childhood fears, which are things like, mummies and werewolves, and things that go bump in the night. And then you've got your adult fears, which are things like not being able to look after your loved ones, you know, not being able to do anything to help the people that you care about. You know, adult fears about living in the world and being able to survive and, you know, achieve your dreams. They're generally more about interpersonal things and sort of existential, more sort of removed from, you know, a scary thing. And one of the things I like about it is, in keeping with that whole cusp of adolescence narrative, it takes that conflict of, you know, going from child fears to adult fears, and it makes the child fears tangible and real and actual genuine threats in a very direct way. And I feel that might be why I don't really find it all that scary, because I think the best horror takes adult fears and uses child fears to sort of express them in a way that we can really connect with. Things like, that's why The Exorcist is still such a beloved film and one that still frightens so many people. I think, you know, any parent out there can really connect with, you know, not, oh, demonic possession, but with your child is lying right there and there's something wrong with them, you don't know what it is, and you can't do anything to help them, and they're right there, you can reach out and touch them, and you can't do anything to help. And that's what's the adult fear, that's what's scary. The demonic possession is the child fear that's being used to express that. And I feel like it kind of doesn't ever quite match that. It just tries to present the child fears as adult fear threats, rather than as representing adult fears. And like I said, that's kind of why I like it. I think it's a really interesting concept, and while it doesn't pay off for me personally in terms of being frightening, it's really interesting. And like I said, I love the characters, I like the mythology, I like the, you know, the deadlights, I like all Stephen King's cosmology, I like the turtle, which I really hope shows up in the second film for this, and that's enough to sell me on it. But I think that might be why I don't find it, you know, frightening per se. Where was I? Oh yeah. Yeah, so making the whole subtext of the sort of incestuous rape stuff with Beverly and her father, making it into just plain text, that like, yeah, that's right there in front of you, I'm not sure how I feel about it, because I feel like it doesn't quite gel with the rest of the film's treatment of the child fears thing, because that's very much the sort of real world fear. And it's an interesting contrast, I guess, but I mean, I would want to know the opinions of, you know, survivors of that kind of thing. I would want to know what their take is on it. I don't feel like I can really contribute anything of use on that particular area, but I think it's worth kind of me mentioning it and flagging it here, because I think it's worth pointing out. Like I said, I'm not sure how I feel about it. So ultimately, yeah, I would definitely recommend you go and see it if you like the original, if you like the book, if you like the miniseries. If you didn't like either of those, you probably won't like this one, but it's not a super long film, I guess. It's about 2 hours and change, but it never feels like it's dragging. It feels like it covers a lot of stuff in that time, but it's a very well-paced movie. All of the character stuff works, all the performances are great. I like, it's got an eerie atmosphere. So if you do like thrilling yarns that are scary tales, I guess I would say, rather than something that's really going to chill your blood, then I definitely recommend going to see it in the cinemas. You know, I think that watching it up on the big screen, there's a lot of films that work a lot better up on the big screen instead of, you know, just on your you know, television at home, and I think this is one of them. I think this one really does deserve to be seen up on the big screen. I like, oh, also, yeah, that it's got a lot of practical effects. There's some CG stuff in there, but that's all done sort of in support of what, at least to my eye, appears to be practical effects, and they're really good. I feel like that's a good balance of CGI to practical. There's a few scenes that I think there's a bit too much CG, but then others where, like I say, it kind of balances out. Oh, that's the other thing I wanted to mention. One scene in particular, in terms of taking something that was not that great from the miniseries and making it really good here. One of the few scenes that I actually did find really sort of unsettling and creepy and yeah, scary, was when the kid's in the library and he's got a book. Now in the original miniseries, they're all the kids are together, they're sitting around the dam they've built, and they're flipping through this history book, and they flip it open to a page, and the picture, you know, it starts moving, and it's like they're just sort of sitting there watching, you know, like a touchscreen tablet type thing of Pennywise going, "Oh, I'm scary, I'm gonna get ya," and Tim Curry just kind of being hilarious and entertaining. And they sort of go, "Oh no, oh." And as a Nostalgia Critic joked in his review, like I said, I just watched it very recently, it's like, just close the book, just done. And that whole scene, yeah, it doesn't work. In the new version, it's the one kid on his own in the library. It's still middle of the day, it's not like dark and spooky night. And I like the fact that they try and make just ordinary daytime things threatening and frightening. How much they succeed, I guess, depends on you as the individual viewer, but I really like that they do it. So he's in the library and he's flipping open his book and he flips open and it's a page showing a full-page photo of an explosion from 1908 that killed a whole bunch of children. And there's just like a sort of wide photograph showing the aftermath of this explosion. And he sort of is like, oh, and turns the page and it's the same photo. He turns the page to the same photo. And he starts flipping the pages to sort of, like, because he's freaked out, and it's the same photo each time. And then, as he starts turning them, it's blowing the photo up on the page each time, and then eventually it's just this full close-up shot of a kid's head, blown off and landed in a tree, and he's like, slams the book shut and pushes it away. It's really creepy! I really dig it! The rest of the scene then kind of pushes it a bit too far, where they've got, like, a headless child ghost thing and Pennywise running around the library stacks. But I appreciate that in a completely different way. I find that really engaging as a sequence, it's just not frightening. But the book thing just, it was, that really creeped me out. I thought it was really well done. So, real final thoughts this time. Yeah, I like it, go see it. I'm definitely going to go see the second part. I'll be interested to see who they've cast as the adult versions of all these kids. Stranger Things actor kid, he's got big thick glasses on, so he looks much more like than ever like my friend Australian cartoonist Chris Gooch. Put pictures of both of them, so I find that incredibly funny. And I guess this one kind of went okay. I hope that no script talking to camera thing. I hope I didn't waffle too much. This is Pico, my parrot, who wanted to sit on my shoulder. I apologise if the lighting's bad, because I'm just kind of using a lamp over there. The end. Come back next time. Remember to like, share and subscribe, as what people say at the end, isn't it?